great stories are necessary for great civilizations. We don't yet have the great stories we need for a sustainable civilization for Earth.
Welcome to Facing Future. What will the planet be like in 10 or 20 years? Climate breakdown is upon us, and critical systems are on the verge of failure. Will young people plan their lives based on the destructive paradigm of consumerism and endless growth? Or will they see themselves as leaders in a movement to adapt to the changing conditions that are already in the pipeline? A vast transformation of society is underway, whether we like it or not. In the face of this, can characters in stories serve as archetypes of survival, helping us to rise to the challenge and inspire necessary and critical action? And will AI help us, or in malevolent hands threaten humanity? With me today are Paul Beckwith, climate scientist, and Tom Riley, a former NASA engineer, whose realization that the work of our time is not in space but on Earth, and that led him in a new direction. He began teaching STEM courses, and then he turned to writing climate fiction, envisioning a not too distant future, hoping to inspire others. His latest book is Dark Heat. Welcome, Paul and Tom. Tom, would you like to start?
All righty. With each generation, you owe your parents for your existence. That debt you always pay to your children, not to the parents. There are a lot of big ethical considerations in the climate crisis. One of them is, what do we tell our children? You don't want to tell them about doom and gloom, because that takes them out of action and is just depressing. You also don't want to tell them about rainbows and unicorns, because that takes them out of action too. There is a middle road, and there are stories in that middle road that are stories of heroes. Hard times, yes. Heroes facing them. And that's what we're trying to do with our Sarah and Janet M. series of stories.
Mm-hmm. I noticed that you referenced the work of Joe Campbell, The Myth of the Hero, and all of the work that is involved with that, of taking people to understand the hero's journey from the darkness into the light.
Yes, that's a key element. Nobody likes a really easy giveaway situation. That's okay. And all civilizations are based on their stories. Whether it's the Iliad or Genesis, great stories are necessary for great civilizations. We don't yet have the great stories we need for a sustainable civilization for Earth. We need to write them, and we need to write them for the generation that will live them. And so that's the big debt we owe. And it's a doable debt. We now have lots and lots of help with AIs and so forth in writing. And this came as a big surprise. No one was expecting it.
A large part of your book is about AI and how you envision a personal computer that is attached to that particular person and sort of makes you smarter, which is, something we all would really like to have, a little genius next to us that's like saying, okay, I got all that information for you. We do sort of have that with our smartphones, but this is another level of AI that's very positive in your vision.
All right. In this particular stories, and it's only these particular stories, we have paired up a human with an AI, and the human has legal responsibilities about the AI, and that's one of the great controlling factors to keep the AIs under control. That is only one way you could do it, but it is a way you could do it, and it's a way worth thinking about, and it's a way worth telling some stories about. Notice that the AI does not have a robot body because a robot body would have an enormous carbon footprint. The AI is an image on the screen. An image on the screen has a very low carbon footprint.
Mhm. Now, those AIs were also writing these little blogs in between. And I think, Paul, you had a hand in some of that, putting in the wet bulb temperatures and different kinds of issues that are really involved in climate. What were the AIs saying? And how it's an interesting way of introducing that material in a way that's not as threatening, perhaps, as the terror of Stanley Robinson's book, where India, all these people die in the wet bulb.
Yeah, I think Tom's told me that he's been following my videos for many years, and I can tell because he's taken a lot of really important factors about climate and incorporated them into the book, and actually by the tool of having the AI do these blogs, these periodical blogs on different topics of the climate crisis. It's a really good way of getting the information to younger people. I find it's actually fascinating what Tom is doing with his fiction books, coming from his STEM background, because interestingly enough, I was just reading an article in the Globe and Mail, which is Canada's national newspaper. It was about the reduction of people that have been enrolling in the humanities over the last few decades, and it had statistics about, like, for example, in the arts and humanities, we've had enrollments drop, I think, about a quarter in the last few decades. And the people that are getting worried about this is the CEOs of corporations, because they recognize the importance of having people with a good knowledge of humanities in their companies. Whereas a lot of the young people are getting thinking, well, the jobs are in IT or computers or the STEM courses. But we need a mixture of both. So I think trying to get the message out on climate change, which can be very scientific topic, very technical, using fiction, using the arts, the humanities, I think is a very powerful way of getting the message out. Because what we've done so far certainly hasn't been working too well. I mean, we're getting ourselves in a worse and worse climate situation.
Well, we've had the movie Don't Look Up. There's very little climate fiction that has been developed, and it really inspired. And anybody who's listening to this, if you're a writer, do it, because we really need that. We really do need to have the stories for the society that's coming. As Tom says, we have a new paradigm upon us, and we need to have people in that paradigm who are capable of taking the necessary action, which is why story is so critical to society.
There's a big slap up the side of the head from AI that caught most everybody unawares. The AIs that got smart are language models. Now, all of a sudden, instead of STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, we have to add an E on the end for English. If you can't write an English sentence, you can't do technology anymore. And so there's a big push to all our technical people to learn to write.
Well, this is true. Scientists are notoriously bad at expressing themselves. I once taught a course in public speaking to scientists, and as for volunteers, they all sat there going, They didn't want to talk, but the head of the program said, "Look, you're going to have to present your ideas. You're going to have to be able to do this." So you're a scientist who's now presenting ideas, and Paul is a scientist who's helped you, with his ideas to create, a fiction which is based on the science of the things that are happening and of the problems that are coming up. So it begins with a potato problem, and then there's the harvest that's lost, and the food that needs to go to people in the third world it's been heisted. So corruption is a huge part of will be part of the problems. And when food is short, as you point out in your book, this will be a major problem.
Yes. And such things as community gardens. Let's plant food in the front yards of everybody and see how much food we can grow in the suburbs. That's an idea that goes back to the British who, at the Industrial Revolution, who set up plots for people who had just come in from the cities or working in into the cities or working in the factories, needed some contact with the land. So they set up this plot system. And so if you're British and you live in anything like a small town, you can volunteer to maintain a plot of flowers and vegetables. We need to do that throughout the American suburbs. We got a lot more land than Britain.
Yeah, well, the victory gardens of World War I and World War II were that, and now people have lawns. This is the most stupid, waste of the land possible, and pesticides and fertilizers. So, absolutely, I once wrote a short play called "The Lawn" about that. Yeah, that is a big issue. Not only do we need to provide our own food, of course, but as you point out in your book, we need to provide food for people whose land may be flooded and overheated and who can't grow things locally. And how do we get the food to those people? Do we, care enough about people in other parts of the world? This is a big question of climate change right now. Climate justice is really a critical aspect of it.
Yeah,
Yes.
definitely. Food is a critical issue that we're about, all of the different things that climate change causes, and a drop in food yields, food production. It turns out that the farmers are one of the weakest links in the food production system, because when it gets too hot and humid, they can't work in their fields. For anywhere near as long as they used to, with the same, sort of efficiency as they used to. So this is, this is going to be sort of the Achilles heel of the global food supply system, the inability of farmers to plant and irrigate and sow and harvest their crops. So individuals having these victory gardens, if you like, it's just growing a small amount of food for yourself and maybe your neighbors. You can get together. I mean, it's really, I think it's something we're going to see for sure in the future.
You can grow quite a lot in a small plot, actually. And if you learn how to, how to put food up for the winter, you can do that too. So it's, it's not a small thing, actually, if many people took up the practice. And of course, the other thing about food is the incredible land waste of cattle. So, to turn that land into useful agricultural land to grow food for people would be a major victory for the climate.
Also note that all the hydrocarbons we're burning for the big great farm industry is going to be greatly reduced, if not eliminated. Large numbers of people will be immigrating in, a great many of which would be very happy to work as a farm laborer. Not everybody wants to do that. And all the pesticides and fertilizers are related to hydrocarbons at the present time. Therefore, we have to reorganize our complete farming industry with a lot more people, a lot larger portion of the population living rural, and hands-on grow that food.
Well, you're right. I mean, the pesticide and fertilizer is doing terrible things to the rivers and to the climates that surround it. And the salmonella poisoning is all coming from animal agriculture, and it's poisoning the fields adjacent to it where they grow something like lettuce, an innocent crop, that suddenly, oh, salmonella in that. So yeah, farming is a critical. And the migration is another critical. There are issues that should be brought up in books and in movies that I hope that people would be inspired by your work, Tom, to create their own works of fiction and create what I call archetypes of survival.
The biggest gift we can give the future is a great story.
Well, people see themselves in stories. They see a way of behaving in a story that maybe they hadn't thought of before, where people are shifting from, oh, I want to get on an airplane and I want to take a wonderful vacation. And, maybe they could see that this lifestyle is killing our planet and change to, to what we need to do, which is need to focus on community and each other rather than on consuming stuff and on in entertaining ourselves. A new form of entertainment would be, to care for each other.
And a person who would fly a private jet to a climate crisis meeting is not going to be the hero of these stories.
King Charles will not like you. I mean, there were so many private jets flying into Dubai; it was just ridiculous. And the idea of I think the CEO of Disney's has said no private jets.
And then, of course, we've had the Davos conference has just been going on, a week or two ago, which is just full of private jets, even more so than the climate conferences. It's just crazy. Totally unsustainable.
I do think, though, that the young people are really, a lot of people of a younger age than us are getting really attuned to what they need to do and are, inspired by Greta and others, are up in arms and are going to thrift shops for their clothes and are, turning into a vegetarian diet and are, deciding not to have a lot of children and all these kinds of decisions. I hear is quite a buzz in the younger generation. They are kind of lost into the technology at times, video games, and there's a lot of depression and anxiety in the younger people because they know what's coming. Some of them know what's coming, and others are just, lost in our crazy consumer world. How do we save them with story?
Being in denial does not affect the outcome. People who are in serious denial are just living in a daydream, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. So Tom, I think you have. I guess the number of people reading is actually frighteningly low. Like a study just came out recently showing the percentage of, I think, Canadians that read a book in a year, typically about half. In the U.S. numbers are much lower. Some studies show maybe only 20% of Americans are reading books. Now, reading online and reading stories online and blogs and things, I don't know if they're counting those. I think they were talking about physical books. So I guess the objective is to get this information to young people in something that they'll watch. So you have ideas for having, your ideal situation would be to have some book, like the format of the book going to, say, screenplay, going to TV shows, things that young people watch. I mean, a lot of them are just glued to social media, right? So how do we get their attention, I guess, is the real key thing. Yes.
Young people are going to watch TV a lot more than they're going to read. Therefore, this series of books, 3 now, are designed to be the basis for an open TV series like you might find on Netflix or perhaps Masterpiece Theater. But to get there, you have to know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. And so it's a long, hard road that is a lot more chance than it is action. There are things we could do, and most of them are expensive and ineffective. But we do have some funds to do some of them. We can't afford to write a whole screenplay, but we could afford to pay for a few chapters or scenes from a for a pilot.
Well,
And
you
so
have to write the pilot. The pilot would be, say, 25 minutes or something like that. And, you could submit that script, or you could sort of do a mock-up of it. I have friends who are, doing this, who, writers. I was part of a writers group, and they have submitted script. And, there are channels for doing that and people who know how to do that. But the thing is to write the first story, the first pilot, and see if you can get that to go somewhere. But you're right. Breaking into Netflix is very difficult. They're just not accepting scripts from everywhere. And I did write a screenplay about seeds, genetically modified seeds, and their partnership with pesticides and fertilizers. And we did try to get that produced, and it was very, very difficult. So it is a long, hard road to do that. Well, whatever the format, the issues that are important to bring to the fore of consciousness to take people away from the kind of anesthesia that people are in. We do need a big story. We do need something that, is going to really, ignite interest. So, that's really where the rubber hits the road, where you have Star Trek, everybody got excited. And, you were a NASA scientist, Tom, and I think it's really interesting, your trajectory, because I've always thought space, why are we doing this when we're so desperate on Earth to put all this energy into the space race? It was interesting when William Shatner came down from space and said famously, I'm sorry for the role I played in inspiring people to go in this direction, because out there it's cold and it's dark, and down here it's warm and it's beautiful. And, come on, people. Yeah. It was a very powerful statement that he made.
There are 5 major things that space does for the climate crisis effort. The biggest ones are instrumentation that actually reads the climate. But the one that's most important in the end is providing a vision of the future that is positive, and we will get through this to the big, beautiful future. And that science fiction and space is where that future leads. And that is the most important thing, even more important, I think, than the instrumentation that is so critical in knowing that that global warming is real and not some made-up thing.
So you think that our future is in space? We're going to be in Mars and go to the moon and travel to other planets? Is this where we're going?
It may not be our future. It may be AI's future.
Uh-huh.
It's a whole lot easier to design AIs to prosper in space than it is people. In fact, after a few years, they may leave without us.
Well, the
Yes.
pursuit of the knowledge is, we all want to know what's out there. It's fascinating. However, to spend so many resources and the immense pollution that one of those rockets causes, it's really not where we should be going right now. And I was really intrigued that, we also have Patrick Hogan, was a NASA scientist as well, who said, yeah, this isn't what we should be doing now.
Yeah, well, I mean, there is that blue marble photograph that the astronauts took of the Earth in its entirety, a small blue, and then a small blue dot taken from some probes and so on. I mean, they really make us, put us in our place, and they're very mind expanding, I guess. And also, I mean, we're discovering exoplanets. The James Webb Telescope can see further than anything else, higher resolution, and it's studying exoplanets, which are planets orbiting some other sun. And a lot of these planets, a fraction of these planets could support life. They're in sort of this Goldilocks zone. So we're actually seeing, and we can study the composition of the atmosphere with instruments and so on, and we can actually find Earth-like planets. And some planets, of course, are very Earth-like, very, seem temperate, probably have water on the surface. And then other planets in the same zones and other solar systems are basically 1,000, 1,500 Celsius, no life at all, but there's lots of water vapor in the atmosphere. So they probably had water on
of
the
course,
surface.
Paul, it's very exciting, that we've learned this stuff. And the James Webb is a great thing. But do we want to put people up there?
Well, not people. And what I'm saying is we can learn a lot about our Earth trajectory. What's happening now is can Earth go into runaway warming, where all life where our oceans boil off? I mean, to answer these questions, studying these exoplanets, I think will give us lots of good information. But yeah, not going there. As Tom said, AI is up in space, is a lot cheaper, right? We don't have to send humans.
We don't need space tourism. Oh, I want to spend, what is it? It costs $1 million or something to get a ticket on one of those journeys into nowhere and back. People want, the thrill of that is beyond me. We haven't really looked into the depths of our oceans, which is a huge frontier and is probably, the forefront of climate, because the oceans are warming so fast and the oceans are so critical. And the oceans, the coral is dying, we don't have sufficient fish populations. We're doing terrible damage in the oceans. This is, we'd like some attention to be going to that vast new frontier rather than, taking us out into space. We all went, oh, Star Wars, oh, yeah, Star Trek, and took my generation into that fantasy. We don't need fantasy right now. We need really down to earth, actual, brass tacks.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, people don't realize, 90%, over 90% of the heating of the earth is in the oceans. There's only about 5% on the land. There's about 3% in the cryosphere, the melting of ice. Only 1% of the heating of the planet is heating the atmosphere. And that's what we live in, the atmosphere. It's the weather, et cetera. So, the vast majority of the heating of the planet is in these other, like I said, in the oceans and other things. We only worry about that 1% of heating because it affects us directly. So, it's the
warming of the ocean,
really an ocean heating problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the best series I'm most proud of in the book is called Iron Seas. We're saying that any geo effect to work on the climate must be measured extensively, and that's where we're falling down on the geo idea. One thing we could do is take large numbers of private sailing vessels, hundreds, and modify them to take the ocean data needed and crew them with lots of young people doing important stuff out there, so that the next time we do an accidental geo changing the airplane, the ship's exhaust, we document it and we get the instrumentation down, and we can make a inexpensive system piloted by the young people to do that out of yachts that now overly rich people are just wasting.
Yeah, the big boats are really horrifying. But I'm not sure what you're saying exactly. You want to have sailing ships doing what in the ocean?
All right. The big thing about satellite measurements is you can't take the instrument off the satellite and take it down to the lab to calibrate it again. And you've just launched it, shaking it to death. So what you do is you build this a extra copy of the same instruments, you mount them on a big rig, and you take them out there, and as the satellite passes over, you're looking at exactly the same thing from the bottom. It's called ground truth, and you will not find a better phrase than that. Yeah. And so what we need to do, if we're going to actually measure any changes we do to the sea is get instruments out there on the ocean, under the satellites. We have thousands of buoys out there floating around, up and down, round and round, blowing in the wind, supporting all those and making sure their data gets back properly, so that we don't make mistakes in what we do to the oceans. We have to show the oceans some love.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Well, there are several things that, have been proposed, like the iron fertilization of the deep ocean to increase the plankton, the 30 by 30 deal, if it actually
Yeah.
works, if they can keep 30% of the ocean not being fished and not being interfered with. The marine cloud brightening, which could go over the coral reefs, and could be on ships. There could be, mechanisms that brighten the clouds so that there's, more reflectivity, increases that albedo. These are all, great things, and I'd love to see them in stories. The pioneers go out and they put these devices into action, and we get these brilliant clouds, and make it very beautiful.
I mean,
each of those
stories of
ideas.
marine life. Yeah. Whales are key. Whales.
But the
We
key
need more
is-
whales.
But the key is taking the data so that we know whether we're doing good or we're doing bad. And unless you actually are out there with people taking that data, you're not going to know. And if you don't know, don't do it.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. There's a research station called BATS, Bermuda Oceanographic Station. It's just off the island of Bermuda. It's been running since 1983, collecting data on the ocean. And, it shows things like the ocean temperature in that region has increased 1 degree Celsius in 40 years. The acidification of the oceans increased 30%. Dissolved oxygen content is lower. Dissolved inorganic carbon and fraction of CO2 and all these other things are much higher. And they have lots of data, for throughout the year for each month from 1983 to 2023. The longest continuous record in the Atlantic of data. So there's a paper that came out recently with all of their updates, and we really, this is just one location where they've made consistent measurements. But as Tom's saying, on ships that their instrumentation costs are coming down. We measure things from satellite, but the resolution is limited, right? There's certain grid sizes. We have to make sure the satellite information we're getting is correct. So that's why it's called ground truthing, to have the same instruments on the ground. And I think in this case, it should be called ocean truthing, though, because it's not really on the ground. It's basically making sure your data is really good data. You know what's going on. You don't have mistakes in what you're thinking is happening. So, and then you get this information out to people, because we live on the land. We tend to forget about the oceans, right? But I think the schemes for carbon dioxide removal, greenhouse gas removal, I think those will work, much better if they're done by processes and techniques that try to copy nature. So they're calling them nature-based solutions, right? And just as simple as restocking the food chain, the chain of life, the tree of life in the ocean. I mean, we've lost 90% of all the large marine creatures in the ocean, right? We need to restore ocean biodiversity, and that will capture a lot of carbon by itself. So, and how do you object to it? Like, I can't imagine people saying, well, no, I'm totally against restoring life in the oceans, right? I mean, that people aren't going to be like that, right? I mean, who's going to disagree
maybe we
with
need
that?
stories instead of the Little Mermaid. Maybe we need, the young brave scientist exploring these things. We could create, these new kinds of characters, and I think that's what Tom has been trying to do. Characters who are determined, who are steadfast, who are, uniting with each other, who stick to their purpose. That comes up a lot in your book. That that idea of, come on, people, rally yourselves and let's really accomplish the this task. I think, that kind of bright encouragement in character is really important in story. They're not depressed. They're not worrying about their, their own personal life. They're worried about the world situation, which is what, we want people to be conscious now of the entire world. What happens in the Arctic is important to you. What happens in the deep ocean is going to affect your life. So, good to know about these things and to weave these scientific facts into story is a really powerful idea. And, Tom, I really thank you for your effort in doing that. And Paul, you also edited a lot of that book. And, I wish you all the best going forward. And I encourage other writers, if you're listening to this, come on, there's so many topics you can be working with and so much you can do to inspire humanity to do what it needs to do going forward. So thanks very much for being on Facing Future today. It was a pleasure to talk with both of you.
Thank you.